This video is all about glimpses into the summary of a specific book, Themes in Indian History, Part 2. And this book is on medieval Indian history. This book consists of 5 chapters. So, what I'm presenting here is the summary of these 5 chapters. Take a look. Hello, civil services aspirants. PrepLadder launches Prep Summary for all the NCERT books and on all subjects from class 6 to class 12th. And this video is all about glimpses into the summary of a specific book, Themes in Indian History, Part 2. And this book is on medieval Indian history. This book consists of 5 chapters. So, what I'm presenting here is the summary of these 5 chapters. Take a look. These 5 chapters are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now I'm going to throw light on the summary of the most relevant chapter here, that is Bhakti and Sufi Tradition. This theme, Bhakti and Sufi Tradition, is highly relevant for both the preliminary and the main examination. My aim here is not to teach you this theme, rather to show you the glimpses of the summary. This is chapter 2 of this book. And as I've said, the theme is Bhakti and Sufi Tradition. Under this chapter, you will find there are some major aspects. And the summary of this chapter revolves around these major aspects. And I'm going to discuss those major aspects that constitute the core of the summary of this chapter. So take a look. The first major aspect is the Tantric practices. Tantric practices represent what is known as Tantrism, a cult, a religious cult that emerged in end of the ancient times and continued and became quite popular during early medieval times. And this was characterized by, number 1, heterodoxy. That means it was not believer in orthodoxy. Number 2, it was non-conformist. This means it didn't conform to the tradition. Number 3, it attached a great importance to the female deities, particularly in the form of Shakti. So Shakti became the nucleus of the Tantric practices. And in this context, it is also said that Tantrism, at least in theory, made an attack on the patriarchal traits of the Indian society. And the 4th major point here is that it was characterized by esoteric practices. And that means the practices that were not prevalent in general in the mainstream society. So this is all what you find under this summary with respect to this major aspect, that is Tantrism. Now, take a look at the next major aspect here, that is Bhakti Tradition. And in this summary, you will find the Bhakti Tradition are both in South India and North India. In South India, Bhakti Tradition emerged with the rise of Alvars and Nayanars about 7th century CE, mainly in Tamil region. Alvars were the saints and poets influenced by Vaisnavite Bhakti, that is the Bhakti of Vishnu. And Nayanars were saints and poets influenced by Saivite Bhakti or Bhakti of Shiva. So Alvars and Nayanars, you can say, gave birth to the Bhakti tradition in South in about 7th century C. And this Bhakti tradition was carried forward later by Acharyas. And two categories of Acharyas emerged. One, Vaisnavacharyas, and two, Saivacharyas. Vaisnavacharyas were the scholars and the philosophers associated with Vaisnavite Bhakti, whereas Saivacharyas were scholars and philosophers associated with Saivite Bhakti. And they played a significant role in the Bhakti tradition, and this role was giving birth to the philosophy of Bhakti. The most brilliant example is Visishta Advaitya, propounded by Ramanuj. And then in this summary you will find the growth of Bhakti tradition in North India. And this tradition is popularly known as Bhakti movement. Bhakti movement began in 13th-14th century and continued till about 17th century. And the Bhakti movement, what took place in North India, was not a single movement. Rather, it was many movements, and together they were known as Bhakti movement. For example, one trend emerged in Maharashtra known as Maharashtra Dharma. Second trend emerged in Assam known as Assam Bhakti movement. Third emerged in Kashmir known as Kashmir Bhakti movement. Fourth emerged in Bengal known as Bengal Bhakti movement, and so on. So several trends of Bhakti emerged, but in all these trends, the core idea was Bhakti, that means devotion to God. And that is the reason these all trends together known as Bhakti movement. You must have heard the names of many saints like Kabir, Guru Nanak, Mirabai, Tulsidas, Surdas, Shankardev, etc. They were all the representatives of the Bhakti movement in North India. And the next major aspect in this summary is related to Sufi tradition. Take a look. Here you find a beautiful summary of Sufism. And Sufism in medieval times in Arabic was known as Tasawwuf. The term Sufi came into vogue in 19th century. Sufi movement or Tasawwuf emerged in the Arab world, that means outside India. This emerged as a mystical movement. This emerged as a movement for spiritual development in Islam. There emerged several saints known as Sufi saints, and they became the leaders, the preachers of this movement. And with the foundation of the Sultanate of Delhi in early 13th century, many Sufi saints entered India. They settled down in India, made certain places their centers, and thus emerged Sufi movement in India. And this movement emerged as a major religious force during medieval times. In this summary, we'll find several major characteristics that are very, very relevant for the examination of the Sufi movement. For example, number one, Sufis were organized into silsilas. Silsilas refer to order. For example, Chisti silsila or Chisti order. For example, Suhrawardi silsila or Suhrawardi order. For example, Firdausi silsila or Firdausi order, and so on. Second major feature, that the Sufi movement was based on the tradition of mentor, that is a spiritual mentor and disciple, known as Peer or Murshid or Sheikh and Murid. So a spiritual mentor played a role in providing guidelines to the disciples on what is known as Sufi path. Next point. This movement revolved around the idea of union with God. So the whole focus of this movement was union with God, what they call attainment of marifat or attainment of ittisal or attainment of wasl. I'm using certain terms here, Persian and Arabic terms, because these terms you will find in this summary. And these kind of terms are important for the preliminary exam as well. So I have said the whole focus of this movement was union with God. Next point. The movement was characterized by typical idea known as fana. Fana means end of self or end of individuality. And this was considered the basis for the union with God. Simple logic is when the self is destroyed, when the self is annihilated, only then the path towards the union with God is open. Next important feature is that the Sufis lived in a specific place known as Khanka or the hospice. Khanka can be considered as an institutionalized center of the Sufis. In Khanka, there lived Sufi saints with their disciples. Next important feature is ziyarat. That was a popular practice, and this refers to pilgrimage to the tomb of the famous Sufi saint. Even today you find Ajmer is a famous pilgrimage center, Sufi center, because here lies the tomb of the famous Sufi saint Sheikh Muinuddin Chishti. And today also we'll find that thousands of people go there as pilgrims. Next important feature, what you find here in this summary is Sama. Sama was a musical gathering organized by the Sufis for remembering God. Zikr was the term used for remembering God. So Sama was the climax of Zikr using music and singing. And the tradition of Sama gave birth to a popular genre of music known as Qawwali, that is still popular today in India. So these are some major features of the Sufism or the Sufi movement, and these are all described here in this summary. Now let's browse through the pages and understand and know the unique features of this summary. Take a look. Here you find that all the pages are characterized by the headings, subheadings. They play a role in focusing on the specific points, specific themes. Second thing here you find is that all the important pieces of information are placed in bold. For example, Dakkani, a variant of Urdu. So this is one important term. For example, Kabir Bijak. This is a collection of the dohas of Kabir. This is another important point. For example, Kabir Granthavali. For example, Adi Granth Sahib. So this way you will find that all the important pieces of information are placed in bold letters. The next thing you will find here is that all the information here. See, all the information organized in the bullet form. Take a look. That's right. So long sentences are not there because they're going through the long sentences and conceiving the themes many a time becomes cumbersome. When the information organized in the bullet form, it serves a handy resource. And browsing through the pages, one more thing you find that all the important or the relevant images are there. This means the relevant images there in this book have been incorporated. Take a look. This is the image of the Mahanavami Dabba. This is a major structure of the city of Vijayanagar, constructed by the Vijayanagar rulers. Take a look. Another structure here you find is the Lotus Temple, also known as the Lotus Mahal. This is another very, very important structure in the city of Vijayanagar, built by the Vijayanagar rulers. So, the summary is going to play a significant role in your preparation, and this would be serving as a productive resource. Good study.